to jealousy them who are of my flesh, and might save some of them. For if the casting away of them be the reconciling of the world, what shall be the receiving of them but life from the dead? For if the first fruit be holy, the lump is also holy. And if the root be holy, so are the branches. And if some of the branches be broken off, and thou, being a wild olive tree, the Gentiles, wert grafted in among them, and with them partakest of the root and fatness of the olive tree, boast not against the branches. But if thou boast, thou bearest not the root, but the root thee. Thou wilt say then, the branches were broken off that I might be grafted in. I give the stress of the original text. Well, because of unbelief they were broken off, and thou standest by faith. Be not high-minded, but fear, you Gentiles. For if God spared not the natural branches, take heed lest he also spare not thee. Behold, therefore, the goodness and severity of God. On them who fell, severity, Israel. But toward thee, goodness, if thou continue in his goodness. Otherwise, thou also shalt be cut off. And they also, if they abide not still in unbelief, shall be grafted in, for God is able to graft them in again. Now, the illustration itself suggests, of course, that Israel has a future. For if thou wert cut out of the olive tree which is wild by nature, and wert grafted contrary to nature into a good olive tree, how much more shall these, who are the natural branches, Israel, be grafted into their own olive tree? Now, whatever the olive tree means, it belongs to Israel. It's their own olive tree, into which Gentiles have been grafted, and into which Israel may be regrafted. For I would not, brethren, that ye should be ignorant of this mystery, lest ye be wise in your own conceits, that blindness in part, not totally, to all of Israel, blindness in part is happened to Israel until the fullness of the Gentiles be come in. And so all Israel shall be saved, as it is written, there shall come out of Zion the deliverer, and shall turn away ungodliness from Jacob. For this is my covenant unto them, when I shall take away their sins. Now let me give you a kind of overview of what Paul has been saying. The first thing that he points out in verses 11 through 15 is the purpose of Israel's fall. The heart of Paul's meaning is found in the use of an Old Testament text. Deuteronomy chapter 32 and verse 21. I'm going to turn back to that text, and if you want to put it in your notes, you can, and if you can find it by the time I read it, fine. But I'm going to turn and read it because some of you may delay me 4 or 5 minutes trying to find Deuteronomy. Here is what Deuteronomy 32 verse 21 says. They have moved me to jealousy with that which is not God. They have provoked me to anger with their vanities, and I will move them to jealousy with those who are not a people. I will provoke them to anger with a foolish nation. God says in this great song of Moses that the time is coming when he, by reason of Israel's unbelief, is going to provoke by those who are not a people, by those who are Gentiles. The apostle uses this text in more than one place in Romans 9, 10, and 11. It evidently was a basic thought of his theology that the present age is taking place in the purpose of God in order that God might provoke Israel to jealousy through the conversion of you Gentiles. In other words, even in the present period, the primary and ultimate purpose of God is to win Israel again. Now that's a little humbling, isn't it? But that's the teaching of the apostle. That's what he has in mind. He wants to provoke Israel to jealousy in order to win them, and so he uses you and me as means by which we can provoke Israel to jealousy. Now there is little in the history of Christendom that would suggest that Israel has been provoked to much jealousy. Nietzsche once said to Christians in general, you will have to look and live more redeemed before I believe in your Redeemer. And undoubtedly, one of the reasons from the human standpoint the human standpoint only, one of the reasons that I can make a statement like that is that there is little in the history of the church down through the centuries that would provoke Israel to jealousy. One of the reasons that I can make that statement is because we have failed in our part of the task too. So he states then that I am saving Gentiles in order to provoke Jews to jealousy, that they might be saved. Have they stumbled that they should fall? God forbid. But rather, through their fall, salvation has come to the Gentiles to provoke Israel to jealousy. Isn't that interesting? Do you not think that that is why Paul said that the gospel was a gospel that was to go first to the Jews and then to the Gentiles? Do you not think that that is why he preached the gospel to the Jews and then to the Gentiles? It was his hope that by virtue of the preaching of the gospel, the Jews might be won in order that the program of God might reach its consummation. He states in the 12th verse, now if the fall of them be the riches of the world, that's the present time, the riches of the world, that is salvation among the Gentiles and some Jews, and the diminishing of them, the riches of the Gentiles, how much more their fullness? If we have seen a worldwide preaching of the gospel which has touched Gentiles all over the world, then and Israel is in a state of rejection, then how much more shall we see of world blessing when Israel comes into the place where God will ultimately bring them? In other words, if by the rejection of Israel we have great world blessing, how much more world blessing will we have when Israel comes back into the experience of the blessings of God? He develops that. I'm speaking to you Gentiles because I'm an apostle of the Gentiles, and I'm magnifying my service. If by any means I may provoke to jealousy them who are my flesh. I can just imagine Paul coming to a Jewish man saying, God has saved me, an Israelite. Jesus Christ was the Messiah. You can see it in the salvation of not only the Jews, the apostles, and others in the earliest stages of the church, but look, the gospel is going out to the four corners of the earth, and the Gentiles are flocking in. Doesn't that make you jealous? Wouldn't you like to have some of this divine life that we have? If by any means I might provoke to jealousy them who are my flesh, and might save some of them. Now the apostle recognized by that word some, that at the moment he was not expecting to see all Israel saved. This is the day in which some of Israel is saved. That, of course, has been fulfilled down through history. And we have, as you know, there has never been a time when there have not been Jewish Christians. Down through the years, there have been a remnant according to the election of grace. He has spoken of them up here in the 5th verse. A remnant according to the election of grace. And there have been many of them. I was taught Hebrew by a member of the remnant according to the election of grace, Dr. Charles Feinberg, and many others we have had ever since I've been at Dallas Seminary. And that was since the time of Noah. We have had Jewish Christians in our student body, and we also have had Jewish Christians on our faculty. But we have not seen yet the fulfillment of, and so all Israel shall be saved. Paul labors it a little more in the 15th verse by saying, for if the casting away of them be the reconciling of the world, salvation is going out to Jew and Gentile, what shall the receiving of them be? The Greek text is rather vivid here. What shall the receiving of them be but such a thing as life from the dead? It's going to be like a resurrection. It's going to be such a miraculous, earth-shaking event when the nation Israel comes to faith in Christ. Now then, to illustrate his point, he turns to a rather obscure statement in the Old Testament made in Numbers chapter 15. We don't have time to take a look at it, but I thought I had put it here in the outline. Yes, Numbers chapter 15, verses 17 through 21. And on the basis of a couple of Old Testament figures, he illustrates what has happened. Now, this parable of verses 16 through 24 is a parable of admonition. In other words, the primary force of this section is to warn Gentiles, because he's writing